Okay, so my name's David Ward and we're in the water gardens at the Beth Chatto Gardens. We're actually just passing the gardeners who just started some soil preparation this autumn, which is our normal cycle. We usually think about soil preparation in October, sort of September, October, removing plants while we can still see them, rescue them, pot them for use later. And then we prepare the soil, so it might be digging out existing plants and roots. And the idea is that we clear the soil, clear the areas, and then we'll add organic matter, which is what we usually do wherever we are in the garden, whatever the conditions, over the sort of late autumn, once the digging over has been finished. And normally the planting will take place in the spring. We do plant in the autumn, especially say evergreen conifers, shrubs, etc. But we feel our natural sort of cycle in this this garden that's open to the public is to put a lot of effort into the soil preparation and cleaning the beds. So even if it's a small area, we'll do the same sort of thing. This is a relatively large area that they're clearing some quite tough ground cover from. And then the second phase, as I say, will be adding that organic matter, so homemade compost, bought-in composts, council waste compost, or spent mushroom compost, quite a sort of not a heavy, bulky organic material. And that's the key to any soil, actually improving, opening up a clay soil, improving a sandy, dry soil. Organic matter is the key.
Well, David, thank you for talking to the Affinity Water podcast series in this number 3 of our look at what Beth Chatto gardens are doing in the autumn. So we get a few tips for gardeners. Now, we've been to the drought garden, we've been to the water garden, and there seems to be a theme that you have about not just cutting back the plants, and as I say, using the shears, not the hose, but soil preparation. I mean, can that, if you like, compensate for a lack of water?
Well, certainly, it's the one chance you have to sort of feed the plants, improve the soil. So, if you give the plants a good loose soil to root into, they're more likely to find the roots will get in, rather than if you just, dig a little hole, scrape a hole, force the plant into a hole, it comes up against solid soil. So soil preparation is as important, if not more important, than, choosing the right plant for the right place.
And if you're going to prepare the soil, do you then plant in the autumn? I think you said that you wait until the spring.
We generally clear the soil in clearing an area might take place weeks before, i.e. we have to identify bulbs and things that we want to rescue, so whilst they're still visible before they go dormant. And then doing it this time of year, so September, October, you can still see plants that you know what they are, you can rescue them, and there's still time to perhaps pot them and they'll grow. You can plant them back in when you're ready for planting. And then you just get on as the gardens are here with preparing the soil. So they've dug out all the roots, they're now really sort of digging deep. It's quite nice soil, but it is when it's dry, because it's been especially where they are under the trees, and it's full of little roots and things. So thorough soil preparation, and even if you don't add anything to it, the fact that you've broken up the soil, you can imagine a new plant in there. Instead of this hard solid soil, it's got a lovely friable soil to run its new roots through. But then if you can add organic matter, that's going to give them a really good start. The organic matter will disappear, it won't be there in 3-4 years time, but it would have given the plant a good start and got that plant established.
Well, we've got 3 gardeners and they look to have a fork and a spade each and lots of yellow buckets. But tell me, David, should I be planting my bulbs now? You said you don't plant until the spring, but isn't it tempting if you've dug the soil to go to the garden centre and get a bucket full of bulbs to plant?
It would be, but it's quite difficult to plant your bulbs first and then your shrubs and your herbaceous plants after. You sort of need to do your bulbs after. So what we advise you do, certainly go to a garden centre and buy your bulbs, but don't plant them in the soil, but pot them. And most of them can stand outside, and you can even pot them in just garden soil. You haven't got to buy, compost or anything. So get them in a pot, and then when you've prepared your soil and perhaps you've planted your shrubs and your herbaceous plants, then you'll be able to see where you can pop your bulbs, because they're in a pot. So you just pop them in between the trees, the shrubs and plants that you planted. So that's often something that we do. So we actually very rarely put bulbs straight into the ground, we tend to sort of, especially on new plantings, we'll pot them and then see where the gaps are. It's quite difficult to tell where the gaps are in the autumn when you're looking at a spring flowering bulb.
And you don't plant in the autumn at all then?
We do sometimes, but that's just a sort of something we do with bulbs. We tend to pot them, and then we can see rather than guess. So we can't see. There's loads of bulbs in there. We don't know where they are. They're all dormant under the ground. So where are we going to put our new bulbs? But in the spring, when you've got them in a pot, you can easily see where the gaps are, so you can pop your bulbs in there.
Well, that's a good tip. Should we walk on a little bit and leave our strivers digging the garden? They're hard at work and bent over.
Top job.
Top job. If we walk on, you're now going to give us a little bit of advice about lawns. I have never seen such a lush lawn, but you were worried about it in this dry, hot summer.
Well, there's certainly areas I think we pass where there's clearly the lawn's not going to come back, so we have got to turn our thoughts to repairing that, and now is a good time really to do it. I mean, a lot of where we are now, we actually put a lot of work into getting this lawn into such good condition that it could actually survive a spell of dry. I mean, I didn't quite envisage it was going to be quite such a long spell of dry, but and the soil here is naturally a bit moister than elsewhere.
So what did you do to prepare it for a hot summer? The other things you can do in the autumn winter to...
Yeah, I mean, so we don't weed kill, we don't feed it too much, and we don't feed it at all really. But what we do is lots of spiking to improve the drainage, because it does actually get quite wet in the winter, believe it or not, and lots of sanding. So lots of sand goes on, but not sand that's contained with weed killer, just pure sand that we work into the holes. Just generally building up that sort of, above the sort of roots of the grass, so it can freshly root into sand, and yeah, it's looking really good. It's just the areas that are under the trees that are dry. Maybe we should think about, for example, that path there.
Let's have a walk down to it.
That used to be all grass, but we struggled so much because it's under the trees. Trees grow, you don't notice it, but over the years, trees get bigger. Areas get more shady than they once were, so we eventually said no, this is not the right plant for the right place. We'll make it to a hard path. So that's what we've done. But then you can see here, actually standing over it, how just under the lee of this oak tree, it's a bit patchy. Out in the open, it's much greener. So there's all these little things to bear in mind. But we are actually just about to start to rake it through, get rid of the thatch, put some sand down, get a verti-drainer, which is basically a machine that puts holes into the ground about sort of 6 inches deep, but you could do that with a fork on a smaller scale. Brush some sand in, build up the sort of area that the grass can root into, perhaps reseed over, but you can't just throw seed onto that quite solid lawn at the moment. You have to prep it, you have to rake it through, get rid of that thatch, add some sand or some lawn compost or that sort of thing, and then reseed.
And you reseed now, do you?
Reseeding's great to do it this time of year. We've still got quite a few weeks yet of warm weather. Grass usually germinates pretty quickly when it's moist and it's warm. It's lovely sunny days, so it's still warm. If you leave it too long, if you leave it towards more into sort of mid to late autumn, then you've got less chance of that seed germinating and establishing well before who knows what the winter's going to bring.
So it's a really busy time of year. We can still see our gardeners working away there, even if you can't hear them. But it's a busy time of year because although you might not be planting in the autumn, you are actually preparing the soil, preparing the ground.
Absolutely.
And then on the lawn, you're working really hard.
Yes, yeah. Well, there's no downtime really with gardening. It's and it's very seasonal. You have to do things when the weather conditions and when that window becomes available. So it's important. Just a few weeks, as I say, autumn people tend to think is we have split autumn up into early, mid and late autumn. So early, mid-autumn, plant, fine, you've still got a few weeks to go. Don't try and plant too much in sort of late autumn because you haven't got that long before the cold weather comes and the plants will just slow down or die back anyway.
Well, let's walk across the lawn then and just walk back to our gardeners and see if we can have a quick chat with them and ask them what they're doing, because their heads and their backs are bent low, preparing the soil. And the grass does look to have come back. We always say at Affinity Water, don't water your lawn, save water.
No, certainly we have not watered this grass. I mean, there's a bit of clover in it. We don't mind a few odd weeds. No dandelions really, but clover, keeps it green. As long as it's green. Gardens are often judged by the state of their lawn. It doesn't matter how beautiful the borders are. If the lawn doesn't look good, people will remember that. So we're very keen to, but we've got a lot of work to do. It's been a challenging summer.
Well, perhaps they can hear the spades going into the ground now. Do you want to just ask your team what they're doing?
Hello. Hello, gardeners. Hiya. Rory, I'm Dave.
Rory,
Hi. Would you like to tell us what you're up to? Because I don't know, because I don't work in the garden. So this is Åsa, who's our head gardener.
Åsa, lovely. You're the head gardener here at Beth Chatto's. We're recording a podcast for Affinity Water, but looking at how you manage your garden in the autumn, and gardening tips, mainly to save water as well.
Right.
What have you been doing in terms of preparing the soil?
We lost a big oak tree here in the spring, which crash landed on the shrubs growing here. And obviously it's been very dry in the summer, so we haven't really been able to replant it. So at the moment we're just clearing, taking away a lot of the ground covers, digging the soil over, and then we're going to add a little bit of organic matter, some compost, and dig that in, and then we can actually start planting, hopefully.
And did the drought have anything to do with the oak tree toppling over?
No, that was a storm in the spring. But obviously drought affects all trees, big or small, eventually. So there's been quite a few stressful summers in the past, so it might have something to do with it. But there's so many other factors as well that could have affected it.
And what did you think during the long hot summer? Were you sort of, as I say, dispirited because you saw everything dying, or did you know it would spring back?
It has been quite a tricky summer. Obviously with the gravel garden, that is designed with plants to cope with the dry conditions. And here in the water garden where we're standing now, it's a very high water table. It's usually quite lush and green any time of the year. But we've got other parts of the garden where it has been a struggle, and where we actually have to rethink the planting a bit if we're going to have summers like this.
Right, well that's what David's been doing, and he's been telling us what to do with our lawn in the autumn. Thank you for talking to me. David, do you want to just give a tip to finish? Right plant, right place. Let's go over some of those tips.
Well, certainly the bulbs, it's a really good tip not to sort of try and guess where you want your bulbs, but put them in a pot. They'll grow perfectly outside in the just tucked away, to let them dry out obviously, and then place them in the spring when you can actually see where you want your bulbs to flower. Cutting plants back, there's so much that we could still learn from that ourselves, but we certainly would advocate, where possible, cutting plants back if they're suffering, especially herbaceous plants, because they often will shoot. So there's a couple of really good tips, and really don't be too, soil preparation is key. It's really, really important, and we put a lot of, as you see, the gardens here put a lot of effort into preparing this area. But it's still dry, it needs some rain on it, so don't be too quick to get plants in there.
And on the lawn, just get working.
Yeah, the lawn is, one really question, why do you need a lawn? I know there's a sort of no mow May sort of thing that we had over the past few years, but question, do you need a lawn? Do you need, could you do something different? Could you make a gravel garden? Could you make a raised bed if you got a clay soil? Could you, because although the lawns obviously have a certain amount of wildlife in them, most of which we call pests, of course, because they damage the lawn, but perhaps extend your borders, reduce your lawn, or think about getting rid of your lawn completely, grow a whole range of perennials and different plants, think about pollinators, solitary bees and that kind of thing, because solitary bees are 150 times more effective at pollinating plants than honeybees, and it's a fascinating thing to do. And what do they say? Make it and build it, and they will come. So question your lawn. That's what I would say.
Well, there's certainly lots to do in the garden in the autumn. David Ward, thank you very much indeed for talking to the Affinity Water podcast series. I see our gardeners have gone in for lunch.
They've gone for lunch. Yeah.
They've gone for lunch.
Hard-earned lunch.
Yeah, well, here we are at the Beth Chatto Gardens at Elmstead in Essex. Thank you very much indeed for talking to Affinity Water today.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.